Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Wednesday, January 11th, 2023. The Federal Aviation Administration lifts a pause on domestic flight departures after a computer system outage led to widespread delays over multiple hours. Biden administration says at this point there is no evidence of a cyber attack causing this, but the cause is being investigated. House Republican majority passing two bills dealing with abortion. One, a resolution condemning attacks on pro-life facilities, groups, and churches following the Supreme Court's decision last year to overturn the constitutional right to abortion. The other bill sets standards for medical care for babies born following attempted but unsuccessful abortions. More questions to the White House about the classified documents found in a private office once used by Joe Biden after his term as vice president. And anti-war activists interrupt discussion with Congressman Adam Smith, ranking Democrat on the Armed Services Committee, taking issue with his stance on U.S. support for Ukraine, fighting Russia's invasion. This from United Press International. Early afternoon, the FAA has lifted a ground stop it placed on all U.S. domestic flights Wednesday and said normal air traffic operations are gradually resuming nationwide. The domestic flights were stopped earlier Wednesday morning as the FAA worked to restore its Notice-to-Air missions system. The FAA system, known as NOTAM, alerts pilots and airports of real-time hazards. It shut down around 3:28 a.m., but the FAA said some functions started to return by 6 a.m. as it opened a hotline to address equipment issues. According to the flight tracking website FlightAware, as of 9:12 a.m., 10,968 flights were delayed, with 2,091 canceled. That reporting from UPI. The hazards that NOTAM alerts pilots to could include runway closures, birds in an area, and temporary airspace restrictions. About 7 a.m. Eastern, the Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg tweeted, "I have been in touch with FAA this morning about an outage affecting a key system for providing safety information to pilots. FAA is working to resolve this issue swiftly and safely so that air traffic can resume normal operations and will continue to provide updates." And about 8 a.m. Eastern, President Biden speaking to reporters as he left the White House, saying he had just been briefed by Secretary Buttigieg.
I'll tell you, I just spoke with Buttigieg. They don't know what the cause is, but I was on the phone in about 10 minutes. I told them to report directly to me when they find out. Aircraft can still land safely, just not take off right now. We don't know what the cause of it is. They expect it to be able to, in a couple hours, they'll have a good sense of the cause, and we'll respond at that time.
Why did your team
We don't know. Okay, we'll find out.
Why didn't your team
President Biden with reporters on the south lawn of the White House. As he left, you could hear the helicopter noise in the background. About the same time this morning, Congressman Andy Barr, Republican from Kentucky, was being interviewed on Fox News Channel and asked about the FAA hazard notification computer system problems.
Pete Buttigieg communicated to the president that he doesn't really know anything yet. Are you surprised the Secretary of Transportation doesn't know anything?
I'm not surprised. It's unpleasant that I have to say that, but I'm not surprised that he doesn't know anything because that's consistent with how he's handled any kind of question or issue that we've had in our transportation sector since he became secretary. But what's chilling about this today, Brian, is the fact that this is happening. It's been going on. We've known about it apparently overnight, and he has no idea what happened or how they're going to fix it and how long it's going to last. That is an enormous impact on our economy and travelers today.
Congressman Andy Barr, Republican from Kentucky, on Fox News Channel early this morning. About 9 a.m. Eastern, the Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg tweeting, FAA has determined that the safety system affected by the overnight outage is fully restored and the nationwide ground stop will be lifted effective immediately. I've directed an after-action process to determine root causes and recommend next steps. And then about noon Eastern, the Secretary was interviewed on MSNBC.
Any hint of what the root cause was of this outage?
Well, now that the system is up and running, our primary focus is to determine that root cause, and I've directed FAA to figure out exactly how this happened, the timeline piece by piece about what was known overnight going into last night and then coming out of it. And most importantly, as you might imagine, a critical system like this has a lot of redundancy built into it with backups. So we need to understand why, with all of that redundancy, it still rose to the level that there had to be a ground stop lasting about an hour and a half and the kind of delays that we saw. Now, importantly, this is not the air traffic control system that lets aircraft know where other aircraft are and prevents direct collisions in that way. That system is not the one we're talking about, but we still consider this to be a vital safety system because this is the one that moves messages that pilots need on anything from a taxiway or a runway being out to an issue with a navigation beacon to maybe an upcoming military or space operation in a certain sector, which is why we were not comfortable with flights taking off until it was clear that that system was back fully restored and working properly this morning, leading to that ground stop that was lifted around 9 a.m. today.
Mr. Secretary, we've seen, though, domestic attacks on other aspects of our critical infrastructure, the power substations, of course. Are we absolutely positive this was not the result of any nefarious activity, either domestic or foreign?
We're not prepared to rule that out. There hasn't been any indication of that. FBI has spoken to this, and of course, FAA is looking closely at that as well as they work to see exactly what was going on inside the files that were in this system leading to this irregularity. So again, what I would say is there is no direct indication of any kind of external or nefarious activity, but we're not yet prepared to rule that out.
The Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg mid-afternoon on MSNBC with reporter Andrea Mitchell. She also asked him to talk about all of the airline delays and cancellations that travelers have been facing recently.
Air travelers have been through a lot, from the effects of the winter storm to the airline issues that we saw over the summer. There have been a lot of improvements that we have been able to secure on aviation consumer protection and customer rights, but we see an issue like today, which represents yet another disruption that is frustrating for travelers. The most important thing I want passengers to know is our number one priority is safety. It's one of the reasons why today, for example, while this issue was being worked out on the systems side, there was this ground stop of about an hour and a half nationwide to make absolutely sure, out of an abundance of caution, that no aircraft could take off without the necessary safety information. And we're always going to err on the side of safety. Now, having said that, we also have to make sure we understand everything there is to understand about this situation so that we can assure that a disruption like that doesn't happen again, because on a system that has to operate 24/7, and that's how the national aviation system works, even if a primary system is down for some reason, there needs to be the kind of redundancy that you can flexibly deal with that at all times and keep things running.
Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg on MSNBC today. CNN has an article as the Federal Aviation Administration scrambled to get its systems back online Wednesday, causing nationwide delays in air traffic. The agency was operating without a permanent leader. That's because President Joe Biden's nominee to head the organization, Philip Washington, hasn't even received a confirmation hearing despite Democrats being in charge of the Senate. Washington has faced questions about his limited aviation experience and in September was named in a search warrant issued as part of a political corruption investigation in Los Angeles. Because his nomination wasn't acted upon during the last Congress, President Biden faced a choice this month of whether to resubmit his name for consideration or identify a new nominee. The president renominated Philip Washington last week, signaling the administration's continued support for him, but it remains unclear when he will receive a hearing. The FAA has been without a permanent administrator since March, when the Donald Trump-nominated Stephen Dixon stepped down midway through his 5-year term. Bill Nolan, the agency's top safety official, was named acting director in April. That reporting from CNN. Wall Street today, the Dow up 268, Nasdaq up 189, S&P up 50. The Biden administration extending the COVID-19 public health emergency until April. This is the latest in a long string of 90-day extensions that started in January 2020 under former President Trump. This comes as a highly transmissible Omicron subvariant is leading to concerns of another winter wave of hospitalizations from COVID-19. The new Republican majority in the House of Representatives bringing up two bills today dealing with abortion. The first one, a resolution that condemns attacks against organizations that oppose abortion, including churches and pregnancy centers. following the Supreme Court's decision last year to overturn the 1973 Roe v. Wade decision that had made abortion a constitutional right. The decision last year was the Dobbs decision, and it turned the issue back to the states to decide. Congressman Dan Bishop, Republican from North Carolina, speaking in favor of this resolution today on the House floor.
Madam Speaker, attacks on churches and pro-life pregnancy centers are unconscionable and un-American. Thugs elevate their extreme political ideology over the most basic gift from God, life. And this phenomenon is fed from here. All recall Senator Schumer's threat to Supreme Court justices. You will pay the price. Now we see the price. Firebombing pro-life pregnancy centers and assassination attempts. In my own state, that rhetoric amid the broken windows and red paint and anarchist symbols, if abortions aren't safe, neither are you. That sentence is repeated over and over across this country. That's a threat. This is the death cult's echo of the KKK's burning cross on the lawn. Brazen, violent intimidation. But the federal government responded to the KKK. Where is the Biden Justice Department amid this violent campaign of national scope? Mr. President, it's time for action. Do your duty. I yield.
Congressman Dan Bishop, Republican from North Carolina, on the House floor. Speaking in opposition to the resolution, Congresswoman Barbara Lee, Democrat from California.
As co-chair of the Pro-Choice Caucus, I rise in opposition to H-Con Res 3. Of course we condemn all political violence, whether it's aimed at those we agree with or disagree with. These acts are all unacceptable, full stop. Hate speech quickly becomes hate violence. And in a democracy, violence is particularly awful when it is designed to silence or intimidate. But where were my colleagues every single time a doctor or a patient or a nurse, a security officer was threatened, assaulted, or murdered just for providing, accessing, and safeguarding reproductive health care? Congresswoman DeGette, Congresswoman Presley, and I have drafted a resolution which condemns all attacks on healthcare facilities, healthcare personnel, and patients. Every act of hate-fueled violence is worthy of condemnation, including those against Planned Parenthood clinics, abortion providers, and patients and other care providers. We stand with survivors of those attacks. We condemn all of them, and our GOP colleagues should do so as well. Thank you, and I yield back.
Congresswoman Barbara Lee, Democrat from California, during today's debate. The House passed the original resolution by a vote of 222 to 209, mostly, overwhelmingly party line, 3 Democrats joining Republicans in voting yes. This is a non-binding resolution expressing the sense of the House, so it would not be going to the Senate for debate and vote and would not be presented to the President in any event for his signature or veto. A second bill brought up today dealing with abortion, also passed by the House, will be sent to the Senate. It is titled the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act, and it concerns what medical care must be given to babies born after an attempted abortion. Here's some of the House floor debate. The bill's sponsor is Congresswoman Ann Wagner, Republican from Missouri. She says that she's been working on this issue for decades.
This common sense legislation will require healthcare providers to administer the same level of care to the babies who survive abortions that they would to any other child born at the same gestational age. I hope that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle will again join me in supporting the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act, as some did, as our chairman mentioned, when it passed the House in both 2015 and 2018 with bipartisan support. To that point, I want to be absolutely clear that this bill has nothing to do with the Supreme Court's decision in Dobbs to return abortion to the states. And not a word of the Born Alive Act obstructs states' abilities to implement Dobbs as they see fit. I strongly believe that states should control pro-life policymaking, just as I support exceptions for rape, incest, and the life of the mother. But today, we are considering an entirely separate issue. We're considering the protection of infants that have been delivered alive after an attempted abortion. That's it, plain and simple. I implore my Democratic colleagues to put aside politics and stand in support of life-saving care for these innocent newborns. We must remember today that children are not the only victims of born-alive abortions. Women, fathers, and whole families all suffer deeply from the loss of their child. Our communities are weaker because these bright young ones did not grow up to share their wisdom, their laughter, and ingenuity with all of us.
Congresswoman Ann Wagner, Republican from Missouri, on the House floor. Congresswoman Madeline Dean, Democrat from Pennsylvania, urging a vote against this bill.
It is a crime now to kill a child born alive. In fact, in May of 2013, a Philadelphia man was convicted of first-degree murder in the killing of 3 infants. He's now serving life without parole. Either my colleagues on the other side of the aisle are unaware of this already existing crime with a penalty of life without parole, or this is another extreme political stunt. Let me be clear. Abortion care is health care, and that has been true for a very long time. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle are not interested in medical truths. No, instead they are interested in scaring people, outlawing all abortions, and criminalizing anyone they can. Politicians have no business making unsound medical decisions. We are legislators, not doctors. And in the unfortunate case when a child is born with fatal disabilities, this legislation will deny parents a say in how their child spends the final minutes, hours, or days of his or her life, whether hooked up to a medical device or in the arms of his parents. Expecting parents have enough worries. They should not have to worry about extreme politicians in their doctor's office or hospital, thinking they somehow know better. I urge my colleagues to vote no on H.R. 26.
Congresswoman Madeline Dean, Democrat from Pennsylvania, on the House floor. The House went on to pass this bill by a vote of 220 to 210, with 1 voting present. It was, again, overwhelmingly partisan, as the previous vote was. 1 Democrat joining the Republicans in voting yes, Henry Cuellar of Texas, and the 1 present, Vicente Gonzalez, Democrat from Texas. Forbes reports that today's House bills dealing with abortion come after anti-abortion activist groups sent a letter to House Republican lawmakers urging them to pursue a robust pro-life agenda and take stronger action against abortion, including passing a national 6-week abortion ban and banning interstate delivery of abortion pills. This is Washington Today. Story from Associated Press, Dateline New York. Local Republican leaders in New York on Wednesday called for the immediate resignation of their new GOP Congressman George Santos, who is facing multiple investigations by prosecutors over his personal and campaign finances and lies about his resume and family heritage. The news conference today on Long Island was led by the chairman of the Nassau County Republican Party, Joseph Cairo.
George Santos' campaign last year, 2022, was... Hello, Anthony. George Santos' campaign last year was a campaign of deceit, lies, and fabrication. He deceived the voters of the 3rd Congressional District. He deceived the members of the Nassau County Republican Committee, elected officials, his colleagues, candidates, his opponents, and even some of the media. His lies were not mere fibs. He disgraced the House of Representatives, and in particular, his fabrications went too far. Many groups were hurt. Specifically, I look at those families that were touched by the horrors of the Holocaust and feel for them. He has no place in the Nassau County Republican Committee, nor should he serve in public service, nor as an elected official. He's not welcome here at Republican headquarters for meetings or at any of our events. As I said, he's disgraced the House of Representatives, and we do not consider him one of our congresspeople. Today, on behalf of the Nassau County Republican Committee, I am calling for his immediate resignation.
Joseph Cairo is chair of Nassau County Republicans at a news conference today, Long Island, New York. Congressman George Santos tweeting today, "I was elected to serve the people of New York's 3rd Congressional District, not the party and politicians. I remain committed to doing that and regret to hear that local officials refuse to work with my office to deliver results to keep our community safe and lower the cost of living. I will not resign." And "not" is in capital letters. TheHill.com reports that House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, Republican from California, told reporters today, "I try to stick by the Constitution the voters elected him to serve," referring to George Santos. "If there is a concern and he has to go through the Ethics Committee, let him move through that. He will continue to serve." And the Hill article continues, asked about George Santos admitting to fabricating parts of his resume. Kevin McCarthy said, "So did a lot of people here in the Senate and others." The White House, writes USA Today, refused to answer key questions about classified documents found at President Joe Biden's former private office, citing an ongoing Justice Department review of the matter. The White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre would not disclose Wednesday when President Biden learned about the existence of the documents. She also declined to say why the White House had not announced the discovery after President Biden's personal attorneys found the materials November 2nd, days before the midterm election. That from USA Today. Here is some of an exchange at today's White House briefing with Karine Jean-Pierre and Fox News White House correspondent Peter Doocy.
On these documents, how could anyone be that irresponsible? Isn't that what this president says about mishandling classified documents?
The president spoke to this personally. He spoke to this personally, and he believes that classified documents and information should be taken seriously. He takes them seriously, and he was surprised to learn by any records have been. I disagree. Here's what happened. Once
then
his.
Why is there a Justice Department?
Well, let me explain to you the process. Here's what happened when his lawyers found out that the documents were there. They immediately turned them over to their archives.
But they were
But
there
they
in the first
immediately
place.
turned them over to the archives.
They did the right thing
I'm not
when they
gonna
figured it out.
go into specifics, but what I am reiterating to you is what you heard from the president yourself, Peter, which is how he saw the process and how he respects and truly respects and takes this very seriously, and when he knew, and how surprised he was by it, and the actions that the right actions that the lawyers took. Again, this is under investigation, is under review by the Department of Justice, and we're going to let that process continue.
How can President Biden be trusted moving forward with America's secrets?
Because his lawyers, his team did the right thing.
But he had a closet with
His
classified
lawyers
information in
did
it
the
that
right.
they found. How did it get there?
Again.
Did the
He
lawyers
did.
do
He
the
was
right thing?
surprised that the records were there. He spoke to this
But they were
personally.
there.
He was surprised that the records were there, and when his lawyers found out and his team found out that they were there, they turned it over to their archives, and now it's being reviewed by the Department of Justice.
The White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre with reporter Peter Doocy from Fox News Channel today in the White House briefing room. NBC News reporting that aides to President Joe Biden have discovered at least one additional batch of classified documents in a location separate from the Washington office he used after leaving the Obama administration. According to a person familiar with the matter, since November, after the discovery of documents with classified markings in his former office, Biden aides have been searching for additional classified material that might be in other locations he used, said the source, who spoke on condition of anonymity to provide details about the ongoing inquiry. That from NBC News. The White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre also taking questions today about the fact that President Biden spent many hours of the day with First Lady Jill Biden at Walter Reed National Medical Center while the First Lady had an operation to remove a skin lesion.
Thanks, Karine. I hope you can provide an update on what the president has been doing at Walter Reed while the First Lady's been undergoing this procedure. We saw the First Lady's office put out a brief statement a couple minutes ago, but what has the president been doing? He's supposed to get the PDD at 1 o'clock. Did that happen while he was up there?
So I'll say this and be very simple. Today is about his wife. That is the focus for the president right now. As many of you know, the president accompanied the First Lady to Walter Reed National Medical Center for her scheduled outpatient procedure, commonly known as Mouth surgery. The First Lady's procedure is proceeding well, and as expected, Dr. O'Connell will provide an update about her today. But again, this is about the president supporting his wife of 45 years. And so again, when it comes to her condition specifically, Dr. O'Connell will have more to share. But again, I'm not going to go beyond how important it is for the president to be there with his wife today.
The White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre and ABC News reporting late afternoon that First Lady Jill Biden underwent an outpatient procedure at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center on Wednesday to remove a small lesion above her right eye that was found to be cancerous. The White House physician, Dr. Kevin O'Connor, said in a memo to the First Lady's press secretary all cancerous tissue was successfully removed and the margins were clear of any residual skin cancer cells. We'll monitor the area closely as it heals, but do not anticipate any more procedures will be needed. The article continues. The physician also noted that during the pre-op examination, an additional area of concern was identified on the left side of her chest, which was consistent with potential basal cell carcinoma, and also removed using that surgery. Washington Today continues in a moment.
Listening to programs on C-SPAN through C-SPAN Radio just got easier. Tell your smart speaker, play C-SPAN Radio, and listen to Washington Journal daily at 7 a.m. Eastern, important congressional hearings and other public affairs events throughout the day, and weekdays at 5 p.m. and 9 p.m. Eastern. Catch Washington Today for a fast-paced report on the stories of the day. Listen to C-SPAN anytime. Just tell your smart speaker, play C-SPAN Radio. C-SPAN, powered by cable.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you get your podcasts. Congressman Adam Smith, Democrat from Washington, former chair of the Armed Services Committee and now the ranking Democrat, was confronted today by anti-war activists over U.S. policy of supporting Ukraine against Russia's invasion. The activists are with the group Code Pink. You'll hear first from the co-founder, Medea Benjamin. This took place at the Atlantic Council think tank in Washington, D.C., an event covered by C-SPAN.
Congressman, that was a fantastic framing, and let me pick up if I could.
The framing was actually not fantastic. Right now, the two real security threats to the world are nuclear war and the climate crisis. And unfortunately, Congressman, the way that both the Democrats and Republicans have been pushing us in this war in Ukraine, where we definitely condemn Russia, but we need negotiations. If we keep pouring billions and billions of dollars into this war, we're taking us to the brink of a nuclear war. Let's listen to the chair of the Joint Chief of Staff, Mark Milley, who said, seize the moment, go for negotiations. Raise your hand here if you'd like to see negotiations instead of a nuclear war. None of you? Come on, there's got to be somebody.
Actually, I'll take that as the first question because I think it's a good point.
Well, I was asking the audience that actually, but I know, and Michael, I know you were a big cheerleader for the Iraq War and for other wars, so you don't really have a lot of legitimacy when it comes to using diplomacy, not war. But I think let's just put it in the context.
So you don't want to hear any sort of discussion? You just want to talk?
I just want to end my point here, which is to say that it's a shame that 30 Democrats who signed a letter to Biden calling for negotiations were so pilloried by people like you in the Democratic Party.
I didn't pillory them at all.
They withdrew their letter after 24 hours. The Democrats have to get back on board of calling for negotiations and not leave that to the extreme right of the Republican Party like Marjorie Taylor Greene. They shouldn't be the ones with the rational voice in all of this calling for negotiations. Democrats have to step forward, have to put the pressure on the Biden administration and say we need negotiations, not more war.
The real security, real national security is addressing the climate crisis, getting people housed, and not focusing on weapons. We have $880 billion going to war. We need to go to social services.
Well, actually, I think it's worth having that discussion. And I will say that I met with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff this morning, and you will not be surprised to know that he doesn't actually agree with that. The notion that we need to get to a peaceful resolution in Ukraine, we can absolutely agree with. But there's one reason why we don't have a peaceful resolution in Ukraine, and that is because Russia doesn't want one, and Russia continues to bomb and attack. And I think presenting arguments like that simply adds fuel to Putin's fire. and gives Russia, you know, the blank check to go ahead and continue to commit the war crimes they're committing in Ukraine. So we want to get to a peaceful resolution. Russia does not. So step one in that is making Russia know they can't succeed. Because Putin's shown he'll kill as many people as he has to if he thinks for 1 minute he can take over Ukraine. So what we are doing in defending and supporting the Ukrainian people is the best thing we can do to get to a peaceful outcome, the peaceful outcome that they claim they want. Just letting Putin roll over Ukraine and bomb it into oblivion and then move on to the next country, that's not going to bring about peace.
Thank you, and thank you for your exemplary way of handling contentious situations. I guess you've seen worse in your career.
Yes.
Congressman Adam Smith, Democrat from Washington, ranking member on the Armed Services Committee, had a discussion today about defense policy at the Atlantic Council. The activists who interrupted the program are with the group Code Pink. C-SPAN covered this program. You can find the full video at cspan.org, our video library. A story from Reuters. Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu appointed the chief of the General Staff, Valery Gerasimov, on Wednesday to oversee the military campaign in Ukraine in the latest shakeup of Moscow's military leadership. Gerasimov, like Shoigu, has faced sharp criticism from Russia's hawkish military bloggers for multiple setbacks on the battlefield and Moscow's failure to secure victory in a campaign the Kremlin had expected to take just a short time. That from Reuters. The House Energy and Commerce Committee Chair, Kathy McMorris Rogers, Republican from Washington State, writes The Hill, on Wednesday said that the committee will move on a larger energy legislative package under her leadership. The Washington State Republican particularly signaled support for nuclear energy, arguing that the U.S. needs to lead on next-generation nuclear energy. The Congresswoman spoke at the American Petroleum Institute's State of American Energy event in Washington, D.C., also covered by C-SPAN.
Certainly, the issue of energy is going to be at the forefront of the 118th Congress, and the Republicans have been leading on a securing American energy package of bills. As I said, we believe that American energy independence, security is so important. We must do more. So there's a lot in these packages, but I would say it's focusing on securing American resources. It is on permitting reform. It is on modernizing energy infrastructure, LNG exports. As you mentioned, we just have 50,000. So there's new LNG that we're exporting into Germany to power 50,000 homes there. One of the best things that we could do to reduce carbon emissions is to export LNG. It's important to domestic energy production, but also to helping our allies in the overall goal of bringing down carbon emissions. We need to be promoting carbon capture and sequestration and promoting renewables, promoting nuclear power. America needs to lead on next generation nuclear energy. We have just, again, exciting technology that's being developed the small nuclear reactors, modular reactors. I come from the Pacific Northwest where we're dominated by hydropower, but across the board, America needs to lead and unleash American energy so that we are dominant in energy production to meet our needs. You can't do anything without energy. It is foundational to everything. So as the chairman, John Dingell, said, when you think about our jurisdiction, but when you think about energy, I would just say it is foundational to everything. And just yesterday, we had a roundtable discussion with some people on the front lines talking about rising energy costs and the impact that has had on us as a people, as an economy. So we had the trucking industry, agriculture, farming. As energy costs have gone up, that is directly impacting the cost of food that we're seeing, and the impact on people trying to fill up their cars with gas or heat their homes. It's a very real impact. So we want to unleash American energy and lead the world in cleaner energy solutions that we know are so foundational to everything that we do.
Congresswoman Kathy McMorris Rodgers, Republican from Washington State, the new chair of the Energy and Commerce Committee at today's American Petroleum Institute Forum. More from the Hill article on her appearance. House Republicans have indicated they will use the majority to broadly oppose the Biden administration's energy policies, including a bill to investigate the administration's release of oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve last year amid spiraling gas prices following the Russian invasion of Ukraine. The new chair in the House of the Education and the Workforce Committee, newly renamed from Education and Labor, is Congresswoman Virginia Foxx, Republican from North Carolina. She spoke on the House floor today about a bill that she has to address student loan debt. This week, the U.S. Education Department formally published President Biden's plan to revamp the department's existing income-driven loan repayment rules to take effect after the COVID-19 related total pause on repayments resumes, scheduled for the end of June. Here is Congresswoman Foxx.
Mr. Speaker, our post-secondary education system is in dire straits. Reforms are more necessary now than ever. To start with, income-driven repayment plans have left millions of borrowers trapped under a mountain of interest. Many of these borrowers have done everything right. They've been faithful to make their monthly payments, yet years later find they have made little to no progress on their principal. This can be extremely frustrating, especially for those who realize they have already paid back the original cost of the loan. This is the kind of problem that needs to be fixed. It's critical that we address the structural problems that plague our post-secondary education financing system for the students of tomorrow. But it is also crucial that we address the problems it has caused for the students who have already been harmed today. That is why House Republicans put in the work and offered a solution that fixes this broken system. That solution begins with the Real Reforms Act. This legislation protects the interest of students and taxpayers by providing targeted relief for borrowers currently struggling while implementing lasting reforms to ensure it doesn't happen to future borrowers. This legislation also implements reforms to simplify the number of repayment options and caps unlimited graduate lending while ensuring college remains accessible and affordable to all Americans, regardless of their financial circumstances. It also saves taxpayers billions by eliminating runaway forgiveness programs that disproportionately benefit wealthier households. Together, these reforms will lower the cost of college for students, families, and taxpayers. In contrast, President Biden's radical student loan bailout will exacerbate tuition inflation while encouraging students to go deeper into debt. Blanket loan cancellation to the tune of $400 billion and enacting retroactive free college by expanding what were intended to be limited safety nets is fiscally irresponsible and morally indefensible. Republicans and Democrats agree on the problems, and we must come together to work towards a solution. For example, everyone agrees that post-secondary education should provide students and taxpayers a positive return on investment. And there's bipartisan consensus that the cost of non-repayment can no longer fall squarely on taxpayers. For far too long, colleges have been more focused on getting students in the door and have paid little mind to what happens once they're there or once they leave. And again, there's bipartisan consensus that this too needs to change. It's time for Congress to come together and fix the mess created by these failed policies. My Republican colleagues and I stand ready to work with the President and congressional Democrats to do so.
Congresswoman Virginia Foxx, Republican from North Carolina, the new chair of the Education and Workforce Committee, speaking on the House floor today. Two Republican governors who are being mentioned as possible 2024 presidential candidates gave speeches on Tuesday. Maryland Governor Larry Hogan saying farewell after 2 4-year terms, and South Dakota's Governor Kristi Noem just reelected to a second 4-year term. Governor Hogan spoke from the State House in Annapolis, Maryland, talking about rejecting extremes of both the Republican and Democratic parties and finding common ground.
And while divisiveness and dysfunction continue to paralyze Washington, just up the road from our nation's capital, here in Maryland, we have already shown a better path forward. In his farewell address, as he completed his second term, President Washington warned Americans that left unchecked, partisanship would foster a spirit of revenge and lead to the ruins of liberty. He said that the common and continual mischiefs of the spirit of party are sufficient to make it the interest and the duty of a wise people to discourage and restrain it. He was right, which is why I believe that more leaders in Maryland and across America must stand against the extremes and with the majority of the people. We can't let fringes and factions get in the way of getting things done and solving the serious problems. In Maryland, we have proven that this is still possible. Our story should be a beacon of hope for the nation, which seems more bitterly divided than ever. America truly is at a critical turning point, one in which the very fate of our democracy could be at stake. All of the performative politics and the angry, false rhetoric threaten not just to divide us politically, but to tear our country apart. Toxic politics will not restore America. Only real leadership will do that. We must reject and overcome fear and hatred in our politics and in our society. And we must work to rebuild the bonds of trust and respect among Americans.
Maryland Governor Larry Hogan, Republican, giving a farewell speech from Annapolis, Maryland, Tuesday night. He is finishing out 2 four-year terms. Term limits prevented him from running for a third term. Earlier Tuesday, Governor Kristi Noem, Republican from South Dakota, gave her annual State of the State address from the Capitol building in Pierre, South Dakota. She talked about how her policies for her state compare to what she sees in the federal government.
I believe South Dakota is the freest state in the nation. We fight to defend our constitutional rights. We ensure that every South Dakotan has the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But here's what I love about South Dakota. We never settle. We never sit back and say, that's good enough. We turn challenges into opportunities. Together, I want us all to take on the challenge of making South Dakota #1 in growth, tax climate, work ethic, and building and supporting strong families. Our nation was built on freedom, but our constitutional freedoms are under assault from Washington, D.C. America needs South Dakota's example of how conservative policies and values make people's lives better. These policies bring success and they bring hope. In the last 4 years, we made South Dakota the strongest state in America by making it the state to pursue an American dream, a state for stronger families, and a secure state. In the next 4, we're going to prove that the best is yet to come. Now, together, we have to continue to build and to advance that American dream. And in this legislative session, we will accomplish that. We're going to accomplish it by cutting taxes for people. We continue to have record surpluses. And what should we do with those surpluses? My answer is simple. Cut taxes and provide relief for South Dakotans. Now, I've been to a lot of grocery stores over the state for the last many months. Prices have dramatically increased for the past 2 years that families weren't prepared for. And when they see the final bill at the end of the checkout line, they're astonished. When I was standing there at dozens of grocery stores running the checkout line, talking to people, about 1 out of every 4 shoppers had to go put something back on the shelf because they didn't have enough money to pay for it. It was shocking. Folks, listen, South Dakotans need this relief. And it's not up to us to pick and choose how they use their extra dollars that are in their pocket. By cutting the sales tax, we will help every single family in this state, and then they have the freedom to decide how to use those dollars to meet their needs in their family. And again, isn't South Dakota all about embracing freedom and helping every single person, not just picking winners and losers?
Governor Kristi Noem, Republican from South Dakota, giving her State of the State address on Tuesday. KELO-TV, CBS, Sioux Falls reporting about her speech that following the fall of Roe v. Wade with the Dobbs decision on the Supreme Court, Governor Noem said it was time to talk about paid family leave and include it in her fiscal year 2023-2024 budget. Also, Governor Noem said that the Chinese Communist Party is the greatest challenge facing the United States, pointing to the popularity of the social media platform TikTok. C-SPAN covered this speech and many of the governor's State of the State addresses this year. You can find them all at our video library at cspan.org. And thanks for listening to Washington Today. Sign up for C-SPAN's evening newsletter word for word to get the stories Washington is talking about sent to your inbox every day. Subscribe at c-span.org/connect. Have a good night.